Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of the show is to provide players with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. You can send these questions in advance, or if you're tuning in live to YouTube, you can ask questions on the chat box on your right, which is right in front of you. So there are a couple ways to submit questions in advance. You can send an email with a detailed question to askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com. I got a couple of those this week, and then I got a whole bunch to ICC directly, and my handle on ICC is John L. Watson. Of course, you can only ask a shorter question there, but you can message. So you basically go message space John L. Watson. That's for ICC members, and I got a few of those this week for the first time in a while, so that was good. You can ask about anything related to chess, strategy, tactics. Openings are the most popular topic. Books, events in the international chess scene, or anything that sort of comes to mind. You can also make commentary, and I'm willing to pass that along if it's an interesting opinion. It doesn't have to be a question. And you can send games, by the way. And I have every week I'm getting at least one game. I'm trying to show them all. But in any case, there's a good chance you'll have your game shown. Try to make it with something with a question attached to it, or at least something that you think is particularly instructive or deserves notice for beyond, say, just a back rank mate or something like that. Okay, so that's about it. We might as well get going here. How are we doing on the chat? Chess philosopher. Hey, yes. Well, thank you. And you asked a great question this time. I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but was it from last week about the 97 line? Anyway, might get to it next week because I got a lot of stuff this week, unfortunately. But let me see. And there's Jonathan Russell there. Hi, Jordan. Wow. We've got the usual crowd here and hopefully some more people too. Okay, let's just do the chat briefly to get the people who've been sitting here for a while. I have a position from a private online competition, long play game, which I come very close to winning against a young American genius, but I end up getting checkmated. It was played under proper tournament conditions. Yeah, I don't have the Fen. I'm on separate computers for putting that Fen into a diagram. So what I will do, you guys can look at this yourself and put it in. I can't put that position in directly because I have to upload it on the other computer. But I will look at that for sure. We'll look at it next week. Hello, John Olafo. Yes. We got? Chess philosopher, as I say, just asked a very good question that I've prepared a good answer to. Yeah, let's hit some things because I got quite a few things in. Last week, Jonathan Russell asked, can you show some lines for black against the Evans Gambit? And I promised to refer to earlier shows, so I'm going to do that. And I also thought I'd show you a little something, but I'm not going to take a long time on this. What I wanted to mention is that you can look on the Facebook page, John L. Watson, that's 3 words, John space L space Watson, where I periodically update the entire list of shows going back to 2015. And what I put on the list is the openings we've covered. I don't put all the questions, obviously, but at least I've got the openings covered with ECO codes. And I add to these week by week. I also wanted to mention these are listed on my timeline, but I just put the list on the home page, if that helps, the wall or whatever they call it. So there's also a complete list on the wall right now. Anyway, the shows we discussed the Evans Gambit were on 12/27/16, 7/8/16, and 6/21/16. And something I didn't mention that we have, I think, in Taming the Wild Chess openings, Eric Schiller and I, something I don't think I mentioned was just simply the Lasker defense when I was quickly going through things that we'd shown. The famous Lasker line, which is something like, hope I get this right, something like castles, and then black simply plays d6, takes bishop b6. That's the Lasker defense. And it's very solid and it's been used for years. So there's something you can use if you want to. It's equal. It's not probably better for black, but it's equal, and it's gives you plenty of good chances to play. So we've got recommendations with this in our book, Taming the Wild Chess Openings. Okay, so what else? I have a game that I have had for a couple weeks here, and I think I should show it. Ears sent a game, Ears on ICC. and that's David Brown. So let me do that. That's 168. Let's take a quick look at this. I think it's got some interesting features to it. Okay, so it's kind of a hedgehoggy thing for. Okay, so we start out with the bird. The bird is 1F4, and usually the idea is to cover E5. And we talked about this, I think, even a couple weeks ago, and we've talked about it. Sometimes people keep saying, "What do you do against the bird?" And of course, you can just play here. But what I try to say is that White's big plan a lot of times in these openings is to play like that and just play to control the E5 square, and usually put a piece there or something at some point. And one way to frustrate that a little bit is to contest the E5 square. And that's what Black does in this game, just plays there. Well, already some players of the bird are kind of frustrated because they really just want to go like that. So, but Black plays this very slowly. Now, I would play probably G6 here, maybe C5. He does play G6, excuse me. But then he plays, instead of playing C5, he plays kind of slowly, sort of almost hedgehog or hippopotamus-like. You'll see this. Very slow moves. No E5s, no C5s. E5 would equalize easily. And let me just see something here. Okay. This knight C3 move is odd. I think White should get the pawn in front of the knight so he can contest the center a little bit, and then maybe play D4. I'm not thrilled with this knight C3 move. And see what Black's doing is very almost like one of those hippopotamuses we've talked about. But it's quite solid, and there's no weaknesses. And since White isn't expanding in the center, it's actually pretty safe to play on 3 ranks like this. Finally, White makes a central move. That's a good idea. And it's particularly well timed because White's thinking about E4, and if Black plays C5, which is the natural move, to make E4 kind of funny, because if C takes D, White has this move knight B5. It's a little bit awkward. And I think maybe Black doesn't want to deal with this. And he doesn't in this game. But that means that White can get E4 in. And White misses his chance to play E4. I think this is a good time to play it. I think something like this would happen, and maybe just castles. And then Black is equal, though, because White's taken too long to make this move. He's made E3, E4. He's taken a little too long to set up his position. So I think Black's okay here. But Black has to now do something in the center. And I think one way to do it right now would be, well, it's White's move. So if White starts coming over to the king side, which is common, maybe just break with C5 now. And I think you're about equal here. This should work okay. Or maybe knight F6 first. Just attack this and force him to do something about it. And if he goes here, then maybe here. Something of that sort. So Black's okay. Doesn't have much space, but White took his time about getting his pieces out, so it was probably okay to go a little slowly. Anyway, the game, well, we had this crazy move, knight G5. Very strange move, instead of E4. And that's eventually going to just kind of waste time. The idea was to put the bishop on the long diagonal, which he does, but it's very slow. And so White goes over and threatens a simple checkmate. Queen takes, hopes he misses it. Always check, it might be mate. Black sees it. And then David plays a very nice move. That's one of the first moves that is critical and also makes a lot of sense. It's got several good things to it. One thing is that, well, E4 needs to be stopped or at least made weaker. Now if White ever plays E4, then this pawn's going to be quite weak. It also means that, I mean, the natural answer to D5 is C4, but C4 can't be played because the knight's blocked off. So this knight doesn't have very many good prospects. It's sort of stuck going forward, and that's a good sign. And what Black should do now is play for C5. That's a natural move, probably a pretty good one. And Black plays this. Now that to me is an odd move. Maybe he's scared that eventually somehow this bishop's going to come over here and take that. But that's too defensive. If Black did anything wrong, this game was being slightly defensive. I think so far Black's played almost perfectly. And White's making kind of funny moves. Now one idea now is to play bishop A3, which is a good reason to play C5, but Black doesn't. Black goes the other way. I think C5 here is the best move, just to attack the center, and then you've got rook C8. You might have knight F5 or knight C6. It's very hard to defend that center, especially with a bishop also attacking the dark squares. And David mentions that he should have played C5, so I think he knew after the game that had happened. But this is not a bad move. It covers a very key square, E4. White takes a chance to get rid of his bad bishop. See, the problem with White's position is this bishop is really bad. So that's another reason to have played C5, is not let white get rid of that bishop. Now white takes, good move, and he's almost equalized. I still think black's better because he still has a sort of ready-made attack like this, and white doesn't have much to do, but it's close. It's close to equal now. Okay. So again, just c5. And now black makes an interesting move. I kind of like it because by this time c5 is maybe not quite as impressive as it was before. It's still a good move, but at least white has natural counterattacking moves like that. Or he can defend his queen side fairly easily. Maybe c5 is the best move, but the move he makes is quite interesting there, working against c4. I think that's a really good idea. I like that move. And then white responds very poorly. I think white probably should just play c4 anyway. But then black gets a lot of nice squares. There are a lot of good squares there. For example, if white takes this now, just c5, and there's an indirect attack on the knight, and black's opening up queenside files, whereas these two rooks don't have open files to work on. So black's better there. It's probably not that simple, but I think white should have probably tried something like that. Instead, white played here, weakening his king side. Doesn't make much sense. There are not enough pieces over there to attack with. And black did the right thing, took a couple times, played a very nice move now. That stops h4, h5, and it gets ready to play king g7, rook h8. So that black really played very well here. I think excellent control of the position. White sacrificed a pawn anyway. Maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. Objectively, it's not a very good move, but at least it allows for some possible counterplay. It's hard to come up with a good plan here. Black's about to take over this h file. So black's definitely better here. White could just, make moves, play like queen g2, maybe knight up, and, just kind of play moves. Play for maybe c4, maybe e4. But black's definitely better. So he tries this kind of crazy move and gives up that pawn, hoping to get the file himself. And black does use up some time taking it, so who knows? Maybe that's reasonably good. Knight there. Now white's idea is to play here, and I think black could just bypass that, just step aside, and black's just clearly better here. He made his maybe first poor move of the game. Well, taking was not ideal. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't ideal. Here's the first kind of poor move of the game there, I think, because it walks into it keeps him pinned. So he missed this move f5. Now there could be time issues here, obviously. King f8 seems right again to me. I think. Well, no, actually, then the queen can come in. So maybe queen here, just stopping f5 because you can take it that way. And now black's just a pawn ahead and is ready to play, by the way, c5 again, our favorite move. So black's just better here. But he plays here, and that allows this nice move f5. And now things aren't quite so clear because white has some open lines now. Finally, white's rooks have open lines, and black's rooks still don't have open lines. So he takes it. There's not much else to do. And then now I think the best thing to do here is just play c6, protecting this pawn, and then protect this, and black's still a pawn up. White has a little bit of initiative after rook here, but it's not enough for a pawn. Instead, he waited one move and played there, and that allowed doubling, attacking here. And at this point, I think the game, right here the game was drawn, protecting that. And the reason the game's drawn is white can get his pawn back. And then it's about even. Anyway, very exciting, interesting game. Thank you. And I think what really happened in that game, real briefly, in overall terms. In overall terms, white got this terrible bishop. Maybe the orders were funny, but white ended up with this awful bishop. He traded his good bishop and left himself with an awful one. And black took the initiative in the center and queen side right now with d5 and was threatening c5. And the only thing black did is he allowed white to exchange off his bishop. That could have led to maybe almost an equal game. But black's still better here because he has a break. He has bishop versus knight, which is usually a small advantage. And then after this, it was sort of a matter of tactics. White made a crazy weakening move. Black won a pawn, but then black didn't consolidate correctly because he played this move king g7 and allowed white to counterattack. Okay, so that was fun. Keep sending me your games. Ask I Am Watson at chessclub.com. Okay, let's go back to the chat for a second. Kasparov Piquet is a nice Evans game. Boy, Kasparov played some really nice Evans Gambit games. There's a nice version of black a piece up, but still losing. Yeah, as I remember, that was a very nice game. How much do authors influence a country's approach to a game? For example, Silman is very popular among Americans, or is it more universal now? I'd say it's more universal now, although Jeremy might be an exception. Jeremy Silman, who's a friend. I think he even popped on the show a couple times. He's he might be an exception because he's so popular in the United States. But as far as influencing the approach to a game, I don't think the authors probably have too much to do with it anymore, because you can get books by anybody all over the world, and people read the same. They see the same DVDs online. They see there's coaches. There's much more coaching than there used to be, and of course, people learn from online play. So I would say it's more universal now. Dislike it if you don't like it. Hey. No, definitely please like the video. Chess Philosopher, how do you like the Repertoire movie? I haven't heard that one yet. Repertoire. Move order against Elyanov at Tata. Okay, oh, I think I saw this. Yeah, Rapport is constantly playing crazy stuff, but his rating is so high, it's hard to argue with him. Fun player. Be interesting to see if he sort of calms down and does a few more mainstream things as time goes on. He may need to in order to get his rating up. And then C4, G5. I didn't remember he had done this. I remember this crazy G5 move, but I didn't remember the order. I'll check it out. I mean, offhand, it does seem weakening, but on the other hand, you can get away with quite a bit against G3, against Fianchetto for white. Yeah, I don't know. Wow. I'd have to go look up the game again and think about what to do here. It seems a little odd. Obviously, if white castles, he's running into H5, H4, and maybe G4. So I guess H3 is a natural answer. I don't know what he actually played. You might want to tell me what he answered. This is probably the most natural answer. You know, you can always play. I don't know. The minute you start kind of going slowly, I'm not so sure. A move like that might be pretty good. If knight H4, bishop E7, and if knight down, maybe you want to get real ambitious and blast away. You can also just play D5, of course, but you might want to just try and blast away. So my guess is H3 is probably the right answer, but that's another fascinating question. I wish I'd paid more attention to that game, because I could give you a better answer. But my first instinct is just you have to prove. I'd rather have HE3 and then G5. But you know, here we are fianchettoing, so you've got a lot of control over the center. I just don't like weaknesses sitting out there. I don't think most top players probably wouldn't play that move. But on the other hand, if you're confident about your abilities and you know you're throwing your opponent on his own resources, and you're a really terrific player like Rapport, maybe you can do it. Okay, cool. So now, let me see. Any more questions? It's a shame Rapport didn't win again. So it's a very practical player. He seems to win a lot of games that he should maybe only draw or lose, and draw games that he should maybe be in trouble. So he's extremely impressive right now. But he's got that quality of being able to survive bad positions and of course put away good ones. There's Rich Gazarian. Cool. Okay. Let me go ahead then and cover some stuff, because we've got a ton of stuff to look at that people have sent. Here's a question from a while ago. It says, recently I rewatched your video on the French exchange on ICC. You gave a sample line game by Kasparov versus Mephisto Comp. That's a computer. And let me just show you what it was. I've, of course, forgotten this. It's so long ago. This is back when I was giving a little repertoire for white. When you're giving a repertoire for white against the French, it's not, and this is a very simple repertoire for people to not have to put too much time into. I chose to play the exchange variation with C4, just because it gives a little bit of dynamism. I don't have any faith in it giving a real advantage, but it's very hard to give a whole repertoire for white with E5 or knight C3 or knight D2, because there's so much to look at. So this was a simplified way to just get a game. And now this moves C6. I tried to give, I think, an answer to most of the black's main moves. I'm not a big fan of C6 right away. And then bishop E7. It's all just a little bit slow. I'd probably rather be white here. I give takes, bishop B5 check. Okay. You give the line with bishop D7 with a slight advantage for white. And I said, what about knight c6? How should white continue here? That's the question. So do I have the actual, did I give a game here? Yeah, I think I did. So let me just examine a game here. This is Larson versus Polgar, so two very famous players. Actually, Polgar versus Larson. Polgar is white. So let me show you this. Hopefully it's the same order. It may not be. Maybe a slightly different move order. No, it's the same order. Okay, c6, knight there. So it's an exchange variation where black is playing rather passively. If anybody who knows me in the French defense knows that as black, I recommend more active lines than this. I tend to like white in positions like this a little bit. Yeah, and this is slightly awkward for white. I mean, he doesn't want to move the king, obviously, so that really limits his answers. It's really knight c6, bishop d7, and knight d7. Knight d7 is... Let me just show you this first. This is the Kasparov game. Not the whole game, but the point is the knight's misplaced there. It should be on c6, and that's a small advantage, but a good player can do a lot with a small advantage. The game went like this. Whoops. Sorry. And queen b3, attacking d5. Black had to play knight b6, and the knight just isn't well placed on b6, and also he's not able to exchange off the knight on e5 now. That's a very strong piece. So typically Kasparov has a nice edge here, and it's just awkward for black to do anything. So anyway, we can go this far, but you can see that white's got sort of an initiative here. His knights are better than black's knights. Little bit of pressure here, maybe an idea of a4. He has an active rook. It's just a little better for white, and you can imagine that that's not something you want against Kasparov. So the question is about knight c6, which is what Larson played against Polgar. But I don't really like this position after knight e5. Just try and exploit the knight c6 right away. Now you could just castle, and maybe white could claim some tiny advantage, but it isn't much. So the idea here is to be very forcing and just threaten this twice. And in this game he played bishop d7, but I was just seeing that it was possible to play here, so I did a little bit of analysis of that. And I think the best move now is queen here, attacking that, threatening knight takes. And also threatening maybe to take some cases. Bishop takes check, pawn takes queen, and then knight takes pawn on c6. And it's hard to answer both those threats. In fact, I think it might be impossible to answer both those threats. So what I analyzed was that, and it does give up a pawn, but I think you were going to lose a pawn anyway. So let me see here. Okay, I don't give any more analysis, but I think it's very simple. The idea is just to be grabby. Now black has two bishops, so he probably has a little bit of counterplay here, and he's going to have some open files, but still, knight takes bishop is a threat, so that's going to gain another tempo. And I think queen b3 wins a pawn, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so queen b6 doesn't work so well. So in the game, black tried that, but that's very passive, isn't it? White simply castled. Now you'll notice things like this look natural, but now there's too much attacked. This is almost lost because the pawn is falling, like this. And he doesn't have time to take here because that wins a piece, threatening this and this. Well, it wins at least two pieces for a rook at the very least. So black tries that move, just castling, and white keeps bringing his pieces out. And that move. Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe this bishop e6 wasn't such a great move, but it's hard to find a good move. You've got to be careful about the pawn on d5. For example, h6, I believe this move is going to be very strong. Because queen takes allows a combination. Does everybody see that? You might want to slow down and think about what white can do now. There's almost a forced, well, not a forced win, but it just decimates black positionally, and the king gets in trouble. Let me just show you what that is. It's this move here, because the knight's pinned, can't take back, and then this move, attacking the queen and the knight. And these positions tend to be just one. Very hard to defend. If you play something like this, your king's going to get slaughtered. First, you just take this. In fact, you win your material back immediately because you're threatening checkmate in 2, and you're also threatening that bishop, which means white will be a pawn or 2 ahead and have an excellent positional game as well. Actually, this one's hanging, but yeah, this will work. You could actually play here, couldn't you? I should analyze this for just a second. So let me see here. Now, do you want to keep the queens on? Well, sure, you're a pawn ahead for nothing, really. So you can do whatever you want. Might be fun to attack, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so that's what happens there. And but the problem with bishop e6 is that white gets a nice little bind on the position here. That's an outpost, right? An outpost is a square upon which the enemy pawns can't attack you. And if you can get a knight on an open file, on an outpost in front of a backward pawn, that's a pretty big advantage. And that pawn's already attacked too, and that's nice too. So Polgar has a nice advantage here. And I don't know how much more I want to see of this. A little bit more. Let's check it out. Basically, already I think that pawn is in big trouble. Black tries to counterattack a little bit. I'm not quite sure. Okay, just defends there. Makes sense. Not taking any chances. Black counterattacks on this pawn, and white plays here. Oh, and I was looking at this. Okay, so white's much better here with these outposts, but he could be even better still making this move, which is really not weakening because black doesn't have enough pieces over on the queen side. Just play there and then drop this knight on that big square, and this is really just about losing for black. You can check it out yourself, but there's just too much that's attacked here. Okay, so that's Polgar Larsson, and so that kind of answers the question, which was an opening question basically, which is what happens in this line. So you might want to play this as white. It's something I gave in my white e4 repertoire. I gave a white e4 repertoire, white d4 repertoire, and a general black e4 repertoire and a general black d4 repertoire. So I've given most everything on those old ICC lectures. And one thing I gave this for white. You might want to try this for white. It may not work that well against the top French players because they're not going to play this passively. But there's a good example. You know, this is a funny position because it looks like black is making completely harmless moves, and yet he doesn't really want to take that way. Probably should take that way because of either bishop c4 or bishop d3. And this is a pretty good isolated pawn position. We've talked about this. This kind of isolated pawn position is nice, aiming at the king. I'd rather be white here. It's not overwhelming. And this natural move, which is symmetrical, and that's what black probably wants here, runs into trouble because of this check. And that's what the question was. And we saw why that wasn't very good, the Kasparov game, and we just saw why that wasn't very good because of knight e5, just to summarize. All righty. What do we got now? Jonathan Rowson is on The Moral Maze on BBC Radio 4 tomorrow. Virtue signaling. Yeah, Jonathan Rowson does a lot of interesting work. Well, I have two, if you get to the old interview shows, there were two interviews with Jonathan Rowson that I just had were some of the most fun that I ever did. He gave one beautiful, beautiful problem that was fun to solve, just sort of an exercise, not really a problem, that Dvoretsky gave him. Really good practice, and talked about a lot of issues. There's a Wikipedia entry, okay. Marked it. I play the London system and I find I'm always attacking on the king side. Can you demonstrate how to attack on the queen side? Well, maybe you can tell me which London system it is. Let me put up the next game in the meantime. I think the next game I was going to play is, by the way, Chess Philosopher, I'm going to answer your question about that Franco Benoni, well, what we call the Franco Benoni, the Benoni with knight e7. I looked up some games. I think it's fascinating. So I don't know if we'll get to it today. Probably not, but I just want to tell you that I'm looking at that. We'll get to it next week. Really fascinating question. I'd never seen the knight e7 before. It's been used by some decent players, actually. Not sure how great it is, but it's still, you know, it's very interesting. Okay. I'm not, okay, so instead of going over this game, let me answer the question first. So the first thing you should tell me, Mark, if you mean the London, this kind of London, you know, for example, this kind of thing, or do you mean the London with the King's Indian London, you know, this kind of thing? You might want to tell me which one you're looking at. This one, you very naturally attack on the queen side. Let me just show you a possible order here. Something like this, h3 maybe, here. Now we already looked on this show at playing c5 lines, but let's just say black plays traditionally with e5. Standard move is kind of this. Then white likes to attack on the queen side here with that move. And you might even play a move like b4. You can play knight c3 first. And one idea you have is if black plays a fairly logical, normal queen, so actually the King's Gambit usually play that first. I'm sorry, King's Indian move like c6, that actually turns out to be a bad move in a lot of positions because of this move c5 just wiping everything out. So a lot of times black will play something like b6, and then what you can do is you can start attacking on the queen side and still think about c5. Maybe a4, a5, maybe rook c1. But these kinds of attacks can be very, very nice. So that's a queen side attack that you can use. You probably aren't going to attack on the king side in this position because you have no pieces over there and you have no pieces aiming that direction either. So there's an example of attacking. Now if you, yeah, you can play knight f3 or not, but that wasn't really my point. My point was to show you how sometimes against the King's Indian, you're probably going to play knight f3 eventually if you play it against the King's Indian. Now if you're talking about if you're talking about d5, that's a little different. And here you also often end up attacking on the queen side, but your first instinct is probably attacking the king side, and that's probably what you're talking about, is playing like bishop d6, d3 and all that. So for example, we have this famous main line that everybody plays, which is something like, now there's various orders here, but basically it goes like this and this. And now you usually do play knight f3, right? I don't know what you mean by no knight f3. Most Londons are going to have knight f3 in it, so I'm not real sure what you mean by that one. But these lines, white does tend to play for a kingside attack. Because look, he's aiming that way for one thing. And for another thing, he has this idea of knight e5, which he didn't have in the King's Indian. And after knight e5, there's nice ways to transfer over to the king side. So, but you can also attack on the queen side. For example, if black plays accurately, he can even do it in this line. But let's say black plays some other solider variation. Often what will happen is you'll get to some sort of neutral-ish variation that's a little bit like the Kali, and white will often end up, b6 should be played by the way, white will often end up playing for b4 in these lines, b4 and a4. Queen b1 is played sometimes I think, but you could also just play simply queen b2, and then maybe even a4 to gain space, to think about a5 sometimes, not yet obviously, but to think about a5, and to think about this move b4. And that's a fairly common way to play. So there are two ways to do that. Hello, ICC dudes. Derp Gamer. Hello, everybody. All right, let me keep going. This is a good opportunity. Every week I don't have time to go over stuff that people have sent me, and maybe I can do a little bit of catch up. Somebody sent me a question. This is great. Asked about the following line. Here, d6, you know, that's a fairly obvious idea. And e4. Now what is this? This is almost like, this is a Pirtz defense, right? But with f4. Why would white play this? Turns out some pretty strong players like Ivanchuk have played this as white, played this move f4. And I guess what you'd say about that, the reason for playing that is because you still might want to play knight f3 and d4 and things, but this is a little more flexible because if you play this, you're already stuck with playing knight c3. Well, you can play bishop d3, but basically you're going to block your c pawn. Whereas if you play with f4, you might still get the d4 move in, but if knight here, now if you want to, you can play nice and calmly with a move like this, for example. And then later you have a lot of flexibility in this position. So it's a reverse, this really is like a birds or something. Or you can play without d4, you can play there but just don't play d4. It's probably a pretty unimpressive way to play, but I think usually the idea would be b3 here, d3 here. And then just develop and play a Dutch reversed basically. Okay, that's one reason to play that. Anyway, what the question is what about this move? Whoops, what happened here? Oh, I see, I got a funny order. What about that move? So here's the move, moving the pawn for a second time, which is quite funny, and I thought, well, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. Well, why is that? This is positionally very interesting, so I actually picked a couple games with it. But the idea is that this f4 move doesn't really, kind of weaken, it blocks off that bishop if the pawn can never advance again. So as in the French defense or something like that, there's this idea that you're getting light square pressure, even at the cost of a tempo, and you're kind of blocking in this bishop here. So for example, in this game, white did play here. If white plays here, he's still got a problem with this pawn's hanging out there doing nothing. It's kind of a target. It only makes sense in conjunction with this pawn. So for example, this would be positionally a logical move. Just keep these pawns next to each other, but then you have to deal with the queens going off, and there's no way, with all the pieces left on the board, the king's going to be a little exposed. So that may not be better for black, but there's no way it's better for white. It's not something you want to play. Grand Peer's attack, yeah, very good. Yeah, little pun there. So we're playing the Grand Peer's attack here. But this d5, I think, is a really fun move. It's a whole tempo down because you play d6, d5, but it really exploits the fact that that's kind of a funny looking move all of a sudden. And that's also true in this kind of position. Either whether, and you'll see this, whether black takes with this or plays knight there and takes here. Either way, that pawn is kind of not a very good move. It doesn't develop anything. It exposes the king a little bit, and it blocks the bishop off. So I like this d5 move. I don't think, black doesn't get an advantage by force, but I think he equalizes. Okay, so one of the answers is e5. It's not played as much by top players, but it has been played by some 25 and 2600 players. And in this game, black just plays there. Now, I think black could also just play this move and then play e6 and wait with c5 a little bit and just establish the light squares. I think it's completely equal. But he plays it this way, like in the French defense, to stop d4. Or at least discourage d4. Same thing here, sort of discouraging c4. And white plays very logically here. Well, I'm not so sure about that move. I think this move, it would be better to play either g3 or c3. Let me show you an example of c3. This is a great example because it's such a miniature. Okay, black plays here, very logical, getting the bishop in front of the pawn chain. Remember, you want to set up this pawn chain, but you don't want your bishop stuck there behind it. And you're getting rid of a piece that controls the most important central squares. So bishop g4 is very, very logical. And let me just show you how this goes. h3 is just a little slow maybe. Even though white gets the bishop pair, black's getting what he wants in the center. White can't play d4 now, which is he wants to play, so he plays d3. Notice that the way it is now, this bishop can't get out, but after d3, this bishop's a little limited. So black plays this move, and it has to take that because that's attacked. And all of a sudden, already, okay, I guess actually I didn't copy the whole game, but black got immediate, instantaneous pressure with bishop here, castles, e5, everything. White's just totally undeveloped, and it's getting mashed in the center. It's a 2-to-1 central majority, and black is able to advance it. So black's already better here. Okay, in this game, white just moved a knight out. Now you could have just played g3, and one game went here. These are good players, by the way. These are 2600 players playing this way. Black played that nice move. Why put the knight there? Well, it covers these light squares. So the knight might go here, and he doesn't want to put the knight here. He doesn't want to play, for example, he wants to leave this diagonal open. So he doesn't want to play e6. Sorry, I'm not drawing very well here. It's because my mouse is stuck. He wants to leave this diagonal open. If he plays e6 to get the knight here, then this bishop is blocked off. So this knight here is a very flexible move. You're going to put the knight on f5 anyway, probably, so why not bring it out that way? And let me see real quick. I'm not going to show too much here. Oh, this is the g3 line, sorry. It's the g3 line, knight here, bishop here, bishop here again, just getting rid of that piece, controlling the center. It's okay to give up the bishop pair when you have so much space and such good squares. And again, this move, and again here, covering all those squares in the center. And I don't know how far I want to go here, but black won in 24 moves here. Got a very, very good game. I can show you a couple more moves. Went d3, bishop e7. Notice black has more pieces out than white. h4, h5. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I think white was a little afraid of the fact that after h5, h4, this square was going to be weak. Also, there is a threat of knight takes. I didn't even notice that until just now. In other words, if white was really careless, this move would win because queen takes bishop here. So that makes sense. So, well, I'll make a few more moves then. h4, h5, knight a3, rook h6. Oh yeah, this had a cute finish actually. But it's too long a game. But now black's idea is to get pressure this way. Not yet. He waited quite a while to do that, but eventually that happened. Yeah, it's too bad. It's a nice game, but it's going to take too long to show. So let me just show you the main game. All right. Hey, John Hartman. Hi. One of our regulars. Jonathan Russell. I already, yes, can you tell me what your Facebook page and how to look up what shows cover what openings? That was the first thing I addressed today because of you, actually, because of your question. And let me just read what I said, basically, so I don't get mixed up. Let me see where that was. Don't know where I put it. Anyway, it's my Facebook page, John L. Watson, and I put, let me see. Oh, my apologies. I seem to have lost my little spiel on the page. Anyway, I periodically update the entire list going back to 2015. For those of you who don't know, it's on Facebook, John L. Watson, 3 words, John space L space Watson. The openings that are listed, okay, here we are. The openings are listed on my timeline, but I also just put them on my home page, just in case you can't get to the timeline for some reason. Somebody was having trouble with that. So I just put the list on the home page, going back to 2015. The shows that we discussed, the Evans Gambit, which you asked about, were 12/27/16, 7/8/16, and 6/21/16. And if you go back and look at this show, Jonathan, you'll see that I also showed real briefly the Lasker defense because that's something I hadn't mentioned before. I didn't analyze it, but I just showed you everybody what it was. The Lasker defense is a very solid, easy answer that we talked about in our book, Taming the Wild Chess Openings. So I thought I'd mention that because I think I hadn't mentioned it. And I did also show it in an earlier show, one of these 3 shows that I mentioned on my Facebook page, on my list. Okay, so you can go back and get those dates. Okay, I'll stop. I won't continue this game for a second. I'll go to another. Well, no, let me continue this game, and then I'll get to the second part of it. So in this game, we have knight c3, a funny looking move, but not hopeless or anything. And black played that bishop g4 move. We're getting used to that now. And white decided, okay, I'm going to get more influence on these 2 squares. I'm not going to waste my bishop like I did in these other examples. And then that move, which really is probably not that good, I don't think. Even though this is a pretty good player playing black, it's just not it's too early. I think you should wait till you're forced to do that. But white has an idea. White's idea is that the knights are supposed to be as good as the bishops because these pawns are weak. And let's just see how that goes for a second. Okay, the same knight a6 move, h6 move. And black plays this h5. I think that's a very good move. For one thing, if that's ever played, h3, then we're going to have something where we can play h4 and really secure that outpost square. And actually, this rook might still come around for the attack. So that's really normally an undesirable sequence. So I don't think you'll see white playing h3. And in fact, now he targets one of those weak pawns. So the idea is b3 and bishop a3 and try to get pressure, just like the Nimzo Indian, and maybe queen e2, queen f2. Put as much pressure on that square as you can. The only problem is black does have the 2 bishops in very well-placed pieces. So what he does is he breaks here. Even if it means giving up a pawn, he's going to get open lines for the bishop. The queen has a lot of scope, and that pawn wasn't worth much anyway, but the idea is to kind of break down white's center. So white takes. I don't know if I give any notes here. Oh, I did mention this. Let me mention this. Instead of queen b8, I think h4 is an interesting move, because then if b3, you go like this, and he's really tied down by that pawn, and then c4, and the king is kind of in trouble. The king is all cramped up here. So this is a very easy way to play, probably a slightly better way to play than queen b8. But anyway, c4 takes a5, c5, and that I don't like that move. I think here white's still perfectly okay here. Probably should admit that he has to give up the bishop, the dark square bishop, but that's okay because if black takes, that's his best piece taking. So black has compensation here, but only compensation. Maybe white's even better here, because I think black's timing was funny. You know, that's kind of a slow move. But instead he plays c5, and that just doesn't work out very well because of this move, threatening bishop takes check. And then that move, attacking the bishop and attacking this pawn on c2. Even now, white's not too badly off, but very soon he makes a mistake. Well, actually, both sides are probably making mistakes here. That's too early to take that, in my opinion. So far, so good. White's actually doing a better job now. d4 is a good move, but not that dangerous because white wins this pawn. So now black's counting on an attack for his pawn. So he tries to open up the g file. It's kind of fun stuff. Really fun ideas. And that's his mistake. At that point, I think he should have just played knight b6, as it turns out. Then the knight can come back here sometimes. This just turned out to be too slow, because now this attack is getting very serious along that side of the board. So the rook's attacked, but it's too late, because black plays this very nice move, threatening queen takes f3. White takes rook to, this is probably what he was counting on, is attacking this queen and this rook, but unfortunately there's that move, that very pretty move, and attacking the queen. And now this move, you can imagine, this is attacked twice, and after g3 there's going to be an h4 move at some point. I don't know if he does it immediately, but that would be a good move. Probably you go back here first to stop the rook from coming in. I analyze this a little bit. Black's practically winning. Okay, so instead of that, white simply takes the rook, and black plays check. Instead of taking the rook, black plays check because he's on the c1 rook, and that's with check. So here's what happens here. Not too much choice here. But I wanted to show you also, just to show you how good this is. Black, naturally took this, but it's even faster to play this move. That's even better, because here you have knight h4. Is that right? Actually, you have queen g5 is better. Okay, there we go. And that forces something like this, probably king f1, check, maybe king g2, king e2, but then this check has to take that, then this check, and pretty soon there's some sort of mate going on. Either he takes this with check or he checkmates. Very cute little combination, rook g2. That's what he should have done. I'll just show you what he did do instead of rook g2, but it didn't matter. He was still much better. Well, it does matter because he's only a little better, but anyway, eventually black won this. It's actually very messy because there's a little bit of exposure here too, but it's a cute game. Was this the point where, yeah. Okay, so he attacks the queen comes back, and the queen comes down, and now there's an attack here. And amazingly enough, this move just wins because this rook check does actually almost, the rook check does almost nothing because of king here, and there's no more checks. And there's mates in the last rank all over the place. And the queen check looks good too, but then the king just goes the other way. And now this is threatened, queen takes. And it just turns out the attack is way too strong because d2, d1 is threatened too. So he could have won with that move. I wonder if I should continue because we've got other things to look at probably. But let me just do a couple more. I'll go to the end of the game. This d2 pawn became too strong is what it amounted to. And then black kind of messed it up here. But then white messed it up too, so it all worked out. Now black's ahead materially, and I'll just say he ended up winning this game. It's a couple more moves maybe. Anyway, he ended up winning this game. So anyway, cute game, fun game. Let's see what we've got with the chat here. How about this setup for white with 1c4? Oh wait, no, McInnes floor. Someone played c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6, e4, e5. You can play e5. e5 is positionally a very good move because of that. Oh, I see why this reminded you. This reminded you of moving the piece twice in order to get a positional advantage. The only problem is it's a matter of tempi. Because black's a whole tempo down here, white is able to attack that with tempo. And then this is very slow. It's like a normal position where white's a whole move ahead. But this move is also suspect, I think, is the same reason. I think it's as if you're in some sort of scotchy kind of game, but you're a whole tempo up. So I think white's just better here. Maybe not that simple in this position. Maybe do you play f3? It's a good question. I think white's just better here because of his bind on the center. Isn't much though, is it? Yeah, maybe this is playable for black. I think just f3 though. And it's very hard to break down white's center. White just develops now, goes here, castles, plays bishop e3. You could also think about playing something like takes and maybe even e5 or queen d4 or something. Yeah, you have to check. You'd have to check out this line. I'm not sure how good it is. I'll bet white's better here, a little bit better. Interesting though. It's not quite as good as I thought. But if you don't play d4, you probably don't have anything because he's about to play this move, right? Anyway, there actually is a 4 knights variation with this, and if here you play here. So that would probably be good for, oh wait, that's terrible. What am I saying? That's just bad. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, so probably d4. So maybe e5 is playable, but I've never been thrilled with it for black. I think white gets a small advantage. Good question, though. I've always wondered about e5, actually. How about this setup for white versus the Dutch with c4? Okay. This is from Chess Philosopher, who asks all these great questions. Knight c3, e5. I like d4 here. e3, yes, e3 is not a bad move. I like d4. I think d4 gives you a clear advantage. How many moves are there? This is the main move. And then if black tries to gain time, you can just retreat the queen to a normal square with some advantage. But I think traditionally this check has been considered very powerful. Because if queen here, trying to exchange things, you have knight d5, queen takes queen is forced, and now this knight c7 is threatened, so king d8 I think is forced, or maybe bishop d6. It's just a bad position. King d8 you just develop, you're threatening knight here. You're threatening bishop f4 followed by castles, maybe c5. Yeah, this position's getting really bad. Probably castles queenside. You can see how much pressure there is there. It's a very, very nice position. You can always just play here also and control central squares. Okay, so so queen e7 isn't right, but this is also awkward. I think knight d5 now, I think, is rather awkward. Or you can just develop. Play here and control d5, just like you do in other English openings. Play knight here, followed by knight here, followed by knight here. That kind of thing. At least that's my opinion. Now maybe some people have other ideas about it. E3 is quite respectable move. It's got to be okay, but it seems to me it kind of justifies having these moves in. Like black's probably okay here. Even if he just played very carefully like that, and if white played here, maybe just this move, because then the queens don't come off with the king isn't stuck in the center. So that position's fine for black, I think. You'd have to look at it to be sure, but that's one idea. The other idea is that normally after d4, this move is not very good because the bishop comes out, maybe after that move, it comes out to either g5 or f4, and the bishop gets in front of the pawn chain. But if you play e3 first, and black plays something like this, and white plays here, then this move becomes more serious because the bishop's cut off. So black's probably okay here is my guess, although white's also happy, because white can play a French defense, right, and play like this. Maybe it's okay, I'm not sure. It's a good question. So yeah, so e3 is definitely not a bad move. It can't be a bad move. It makes total sense, but how good it is, I'm not sure. That'd be my answer to that. I'm just not convinced, not completely convinced. Even this ending with the queens off, it's not as good as the ones we looked at earlier because you can't get a bishop out really fast to an active square before you castle. You're not going to be able to attack this king effectively. So that one's probably slightly better for white, not sure, might be about equal. So that's why I mentioned bishop e7 instead. Yeah, so e3 is respectable, but I'm not that excited. Somebody said d3 is better. Well, Alan says that, but it's so passive. You're never going to get an advantage if you make slow moves like this, because black's not going to cooperate by playing d5 and giving you a reverse Sicilian. So this is going to be just about even. You might even get a closed Sicilian kind of position if black fianchettos and you fianchetto. There's also lines like this that are considered okay for black. Just this move, a Rossolimo reversed kind of position. So d3 is fine. It's a perfectly good move, but it's a little slow, and so I don't think you're going to get an advantage from that. Yeah, basically what I'm saying is these moves are okay, but I've always been worried about that move. That always seemed to give white some advantage. I could be wrong. I mean, it's the sort of thing that if you play very, very carefully, maybe you'll be okay. But I don't like losing positionally. I don't like the looks of that position. Okay, better or just different? Yeah, sure. It's just different ideas. The real question is, can you get an advantage against these two moves with this order? And you could argue maybe that you can't get an advantage with either move. But I think if you were going to get an advantage, it would probably be with d4. You could also play things like knight here and then d4. But I don't know about that. Yeah, good question, but you're right. It's a matter of taste. It's just that e3 is a little slow. I'd like to play something a little faster. Hello, Mr. Watson. Any tips on optimal placement of rooks when there are multiple options? There's a joke that no matter which way the rooks get placed, they always end up misplaced. Yeah, in my games, that's definitely true. If I think for 15 minutes about which rook to put where, I've wasted my time because I always look after the game and go, oh, I should have put the other rook. Yeah, so one of the toughest questions in chess, and I would say that even top grandmasters don't really. I think it's because often there isn't much difference. That there'll be these two choices. A lot of times it's things in the center. It's like putting your rooks on C1 and D1, or D1 and E1, or B1 and D1, or something like that. And it turns out there are advantages to both placements often. And so maybe it's not worth spending too much time worrying about it. It's a little too technical an issue. So yeah, it's a good joke. And there's a lot of truth to it. I think we all do this. We think about where to put the rooks, and there's two good options or three good options even, and it just turns out that we do something that maybe wasn't even the best option or was just equivalent, and it didn't really matter. But the main point is we burn up too much time thinking about it. So you just have to kind of pull the trigger when you're trying to figure out about. That would be my tip. My tip is use your instincts as long as there's nothing hanging. I mean, tactically, you want to be consistent. And if you have some tactical win, of course, it matters where you put the rooks. But generally, generally, just use your instincts. And if it happens to be technically slightly inferior, well, you just have to live with that. You're probably not going to lose the game because of making the wrong rook move. Great question, though. And I'll tell you what, as shows go on, I'll try and give examples of that, of where people, had choices like that and whether they mattered or not. Okay, so wait, this game, did we finish this game? Let me just see. I think we did. Yeah, we did. Okay, so let me show you the other related game to that. Wow, gotten totally disorganized here. This one's by Nigel Short, and it's against Jan Timman, so they both played for the World Championship. So we're talking about serious players here, and that means that a serious player played this move, the F4 move, and which gives it some legitimacy. I noticed Ivanchuk also played it. Some other good players played it, but Timman also played this move. So it's not as though it doesn't occur to a good player to play that move. You'd think if you just had a beginner's book, you'd think playing this move is just ridiculous. Moving a pawn for the second time like that is just crazy. But it makes so much sense once F4 is in. I mean, black can't claim a forced advantage, but it's completely reasonable. Now this time white took, which I think is the better move, even though it leaves things kind of funny. That pawn looks kind of funny, but at least it doesn't lose time. Now black can just play here, and after there he can go straight back, or he can go over. I think I would play this move, which hits this, but that's not really the reason for it. The reason for it is to keep it off the last rank, but keep it flexibly placed. So it's kind of like a Queen D6 Scandinavian, where white played F4. So let me show you what I meant by that. This is the Scandinavian defense, and this is a variation that's very popular. There's books and videos all over about it, and it's quite a good move. I mean, it'd be my favorite move, I think, in the Scandinavian. And it's as if white played this for free, and now white has another move. And the question is does F4 hurt or help? And you can try and assess that for yourself, but I think you can see it's not necessarily a positive to have F4 in. So you could just play queen takes D5 there. But most people play knight F6, and that's what Timman did. Whoops, something's wrong. Why? What happened here? There it is. Okay, and white played knight F3. You could easily just play, if you play, there's a game with bishop c4. I won't show you that because it's getting too late. Oh yeah, it is getting late. So let me just show you this game. Knight f3, knight takes d5, d4. Now normally I'd say black's better here just because there's big holes here, interior weaknesses. But white has gained a lot of time and has this move c4 and should be okay. White's got some time and some space, so he really should be okay. Black in this game played g6, good move. Just going to get castled and focus on that square. Another game played bishop g4, which is completely natural for reasons we talked about. Get the bishop out in front of the pawn chain before you play e6. And then he played bishop f3. I think maybe black should just move back and play e6 because white got a little bit too much space here. It looked good for black, but notice he doesn't have time to play queen takes here because of queen takes b4, not queen takes here because of knight c2 check. So So black has to slow down here now, and black played here. Oh yeah, this just doesn't work out. It's close. This move, he's threatening knight takes d4, and now black played e6, and white played bishop d2, still threatening to take that knight. And it was just awkward for black, even though black has a lot of pieces out. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's keep going. So black in this game played g6, white played here. Now I think you should just play c4, and then after knight b6, now you could play knight f6. Knight f6 is fine, but if knight b6 would be probably the main line, knight here, bishop here, and then the bishop just protects the center, probably with bishop e3, or h3 maybe. h3 is actually suggested. If bishop e3, bishop g4 is a good move, with a lot of pressure on that center. So the best move is probably h3, and then I like to play, I want to get c5 in here, breaking up the center. And I think black's about equal here. If white tries to win a pawn, he runs into this idea, this ending. And this ending's actually okay for black, if not even better, because these pawns are also weak. All these pawns are weak. And black's going to be able to grab that front of the triple pawns. On the other hand, white has two bishops, so maybe it's about equal. It's probably only about equal. But it's a fun position. It's an interesting position. So anyway, that would be a way for black to play it. In the game, white played there. That really didn't put enough pressure on black in the center. And these weaknesses now kind of mean something because black's catching up in development. So this position was actually pretty easy for black to play. I think the best move here, by the way, was this move. I think this is an excellent move. Just beautiful diagonal. And black's catching up in development. So this is my opinion. And on a move like this, which is what happened in the game, just go here. And the knight can't go here because of knight e3, so the knight has to kind of come over to the side. Pretty soon we're going to play c5, maybe even right away. And then here. A position like this has to favor black, I think, just because it's too many weaknesses in the center for white. It's a small advantage, but it's an advantage. Now in the game, he played here, maybe not quite as accurate. There, takes, c5. And he got that c5 break in, attacking the center. That's what counts. And white naturally took that. And black just played there with the idea of queen takes, c5 check. So white made the right move here. White played bishop takes, and that looks like a terrible move, but after all, white has two bishops, so he's not giving up the bishop pair. And what he's trying to do is stabilize the position. You'll see how this works by giving black an isolated pawn. Now, black's perfectly okay here with this isolated pawn because all his pieces are in the center, and he's got two files to work with, and the move d4, and this move pawn f4 is a bit of a problem. On the other hand, it is an isolated pawn, so white should be okay too. So here's how the game went. Now the idea is to play knight here or f3 and then put a knight on d4, blockading the pawn. Black simply develops. And black starts attacking on the queen side to make up for his isolated pawn. After all, he does have space. And now he's gaining more space. And that happened. And I think they agreed to a draw very soon. Actually, one more move and they agreed to a draw. And that's because even though this looks weak here, white's queen side is weak too. So it's just a trade-off. It's about equal. A good, interesting positional game. Yeah, Rogers played a lot, and Valls of the Grandmaster from Germany wrote books about it and played it. Who else played the Scandinavian? Of course, Anand famously played the Scandinavian against Kasparov in the World Championship and got the better game as black. I think Carlsen has played the Scandinavian. I can't quite remember, but it seems like fairly recently he played the Scandinavian. Yes, Steiner mentions, would you play knight f6 as well as queen d5? And the answer was yes, as you saw. What else? Ian Rogers played Scandinavian for sure. Who else? Who are the other famous? Oh, Larson, actually is the one who sort of made it popular. Once Larson played it and made this line look respectable, then all of a sudden everybody started playing it for black. For a little while you got all kinds of players, especially 2600 type players were all playing this, and especially Scandinavians. I think they were kind of proud of this line. And the reason that Larson started, I think I mentioned this before, the reason that this started working for black, at least in people's minds, let me see if I can get some sort of basic kind of position. was that what Larson discovered or made clear was that this bishop pair position here, this one, was actually okay for black because this is the ideal restraint center here, and this bishop's a little misplaced. And so black is able to just reorganize. I don't know exactly what the moves are, but somehow black got a pretty decent game out of this. Just maybe bringing a rook to d8, and that kind of that was the comeback for the Scandinavian. And then of course it got very, very sophisticated, and white found better ways to play, and black found better ways to play, and it just went on and on and on. But that was kind of the beginning of the Scandinavian revolution. And then at some point, Michael Meltz wrote a book about this move, Queen d6. And now it had been played in many, many games, but I think that book had an influence because he showed how nice and active a lot of black's play is. And a lot of people still play this line. Some of the top players in the world played this line, briefly at least. And it's still thought to be okay for black. So Carlsen did against Caruana. Okay, I thought so. Twice. Wow. Okay. There you go. Smearden, David Smearden, yep, wrote a book about it. There are actually several books. There's Wall's book. Matthias Walls has 2 books about it. Who's the other person that keeps writing books? Davies? No. Scandinavian is black. Who's the guy that oh, Martin, Andrew Martin. Andrew Martin has DVDs and I think 1 book and all kinds of articles and things. Andrew Martin plays the Scandinavian is black. And of course, recently it seems like they do everything here. So this is a traditional move that used to be played a fair amount and then was given up because it's kind of passive, and now it's played again. And even this bizarre move has been played. Just totally crazy. Don't ask me why. I saw an article once in a Kaisibur magazine about playing check, which looks insane because you're going to lose more time, right? But black plays, I think, this move now, and it's not so easy. I think. I have no idea. I have no idea how people can get away with these things, but maybe that one's not so good. But there was a whole article about it. I'm very skeptical of that one. But yeah, Scandinavian. I don't know who else. Yes. Okay, David Smearden, who maybe is the one who writes about it for Chess Publishing also. Great, you guys know a lot about this stuff. Yeah, Scandinavian is probably a very good thing, but you have to pick a line and kind of stick with it. Probably you have to decide whether you're going to go classical or you're going to go modern. You could play this. Somebody on this show, I think, said they played Queen D8 here. They liked Queen D8 here. I mean, I don't know. To me, I'm still too. I grew up with all the sort of classical rules, and I just feel like you're losing so much time. But in fact, black's position's so solid. It's very solid. Oh, hasn't Kamsky? I think Kamsky's played the Scandinavian before. I think. Probably everyone has at one point or another. Of course, as I say, the most famous game is probably Anand getting the better game against Kasparov. Don't know if he won that game. I think he probably drew that game, but he did stand better. All right, so we're running fairly late now. I think I'll probably close it up there. Remember, ask iamwatson@chessclub.com. I'll try to get the things that I didn't answer today or answer them better, but I'll also do ones that I've left over from the last couple of weeks. Chess Philosopher, I have one of yours coming. And send me games. I showed that one game today. I'm very open to showing games. I think games are fun. And as I say, if you can send me games, they don't have to be flashy. They can be if you want them to be. But the main point is that there's something to show that people can learn from, or that you have a question that you didn't understand what was going on in the game. That's probably ideal to send a game of that type. All right, everybody. I will catch you next week, hopefully. Thanks, everybody, for coming.